We'll call the public hearing on a petition to revoke the conditional use permit that has been submitted by John and Sally Musil and Jeff and Ruby Ayler for parcel number 39-09-07-300-017.002-006. Before we get into the actual public hearing, we've got a little bit of housekeeping we need to do. I'll let our county attorney address that. There's he's representing two parties in this case, and we needed to address and see if we're willing to give a waiver for that side of things. So I'll let him cover that issue.
Yes, well, I wouldn't say that I'm addressing two parties in the same case, but I represent Rikers Ridge Water Company, and I also represent Jefferson County, including the Planning Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals. The reason that this even comes up is that Rikers Ridge Water Company has provided some information to both boards with regard to what's currently pending before the Planning Commission, what's currently pending before the Board of Zoning Appeals. More importantly, there was recently a hearing in the Rikers Ridge Water Company case, and Mr. Simons raised an objection to my representing both of the entities. The judge ruled against that issue because to the extent that there was any conflict, it would only be between the county and Rikers Ridge Water Company. I have not identified any conflict of interest. I don't believe that there is any interest of Rikers Ridge Water Company that is contrary to the interest of the county or vice versa. My duties of confidentiality, my duties of representation remain the same to both of those entities. I am not here today representing Rikers Ridge Water Company. I'm here today representing the county. It is not my intent to speak on their behalf. So I have not identified a conflict of interest. I don't believe that there is one, but to the extent that there is, I thought it was important that everybody had noticed that I represent Rikers Ridge Water Company. I also represent the county. And to the extent that there was any potential conflicts that I would ask that the parties waive that so that I can continue to provide representation to them and representation to you within different matters.
Does anyone have any objections, any comments on that? All right, then move ahead with that then. Then also want to cover on this in the violation that was presented to us, they were requesting, I'll just read through it because there's a little bit of background. We're requesting you revoke the conditional use permit granted to San Simmons and our Lost Trails LLC located at 4004 and 43008 Old State Road 62. We'll come back to the fourth. I'm not sure what that address is, so we'll do clarification. Madison, Indiana. This permit was originally issued on September 9th, 21 with several conditions. Mr. Simons, Lost Trails, has not complied with many of these conditions. These violations of the conditions were discussed in great detail at the April 1st, 2025 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting and are recorded in the minutes of that meeting. Also, another of the conditions for the renewal of the permit was to come back to the board for approval if there was a change in ownership. Mr. Simmons has had several changes of ownership on the property since 2021 permit issue date, but he's only recently come before the board to disclosing a change of ownership. Since Mr. Simmons, Lost Trails, has violated the conditions required for the conditional use permit, we request that you revoke the conditional use permit and order the campgrounds closed. We are adjacent property owners and are very concerned about this. The first thing I wanted to cover, the information that will have to be presented to this board this evening needs to be presented directly. Information that was already given to the Board of Zoning Appeals will not be considered part of our decision-making process. We'll make our decisions based on information that is presented here tonight. And then I'd also like to turn it back over to Pat a little bit to cover some of the areas as far as what we will be addressing, because there's things that when the permit was originally approved that were discussed in the minutes at the meeting, but they were not made as part of the conditional use that was there. And so our findings are going to be based on violations of our ordinances and violations of the written conditional use facts that we put in, but Pat can cover that a little better than me.
Sure. So different counties handle it in different ways. Some counties have a specific ordinance with regard to potential revocation of conditional use permits. Those often go in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they can be based on a number of factors. It can't be based on just we've changed our mind and we no longer think that it's a good use of the property. But for example, if there have been a violation of the conditions, if there's a public safety issue, if the land around it has changed such that the conditional use permit should be revoked. Our ordinance does not have a specific provision for the Board of Zoning Appeals to consider revocation of conditional use permits. And so it then falls to the inherent authority of the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission under the UDO, the Unified Development Ordinance, is the body in Jefferson County that is charged with the enforcement of the UDO, the enforcement of the zoning ordinance. And as a result, then what this body can do is, under those considerations, make a determination as to whether or not the zoning of the county has been in fact violated. And the way that would fall then is that if the conditions of the conditional use permit have been violated, then that would mean that the current use is illegal and that therefore the Plan Commission could proceed with enforcement action against it. However, as Warren was saying, those considerations are limited. So either that there is some violation of the ordinance itself, that you can point to the ordinance and say, this use is not in keeping with the use that is allowed under the ordinance at the time that the use was approved. Or with conditional use permits, when there are specific conditions that are listed as a part of that in the written findings of the Board of Zoning Appeals as conditions to it, those become part of the use and the approved use, and therefore, if those are specifically violated, that would also be a violation of our zoning. But to the extent that there is other discussion or other issues that were not specifically made conditions by the Board of Zoning Appeals, then those do not carry the full force and authority of findings by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and therefore are not subject to being enforced by the Commission.
Well, then at this time, we'll open the hearing up and we will let the complainant start with. Come on up.
Diesel,
Mhm.
and I filed this request. I'm a little sketchy now on what you've outlined about what can and can't be considered by the board as opposed to what has happened in the past. So I'm just gonna talk about what I know, and then you have to decide whether it falls in whatever guidelines that Pat did. But so I'm not trying to get out of bounds. I'm just trying.
I understand.
So the conditional use permit was originally issued in 2021. And it had certain conditions on it about fire protection, water services, getting in touch with neighbors about boundaries, the types of cabins that he could build there. And then it had this thing about the transfer of properties that had to come back to the zoning or the board to get reapproved. So in the April meeting of the Board of Appeals, the water company brought up several issues that had happened in what they had tried to work out to get adequate water supply to the campgrounds that hadn't happened. Fire company issued or talked about how there were certain conditions that they had talked about in access to the roads and possibly, being able to cite, there's no fire hydrant back there. To get fire protection back there, and that hadn't been complied with. The original applications were talking about building like these, he called them KOA style cabins, and then talked about mobile home or motor home pads and things. And what's there now are tow motor homes, which are like mini trailers that have a tongue on them, that have wheels, have these skirted them, and so they were not ever in the original application. And then this issue about, I see your puzzle. It has to do with the type of thing it was. Yeah. So, and then the conveyance is back and forth many times of posting back every time. That's really why we're here, is he finally came forward in the April meeting and wanted to get the conditional use permit transferred over because he had transferred it from himself to an entity or vice versa, whichever way it is. But he'd done it numerous times. So my thought is that these conditions were valid and were there by the zoning board of appeals, and that they were not fulfilled after 3.5 years. So, and they're still not fulfilled. So
Real quick, sorry to interrupt. What did you mean by transferring it several times?
well,
I mean, has he done it more than once?
Yeah.
I mean, how many times has he done it?
I don't know, 5 or 6 here. Here.
Put it in the paperwork that we.
Yeah, I've got it.
Okay.
Well, I pulled it up again. He did it since then, since I filed that. Anyway,
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
well, I can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 times, maybe 6. So. I'm not gonna harp on this a lot. My thought is that if there's rules that were supposed to be upheld and conditions, and they weren't, then that's a violation of it, and so the conditional use permit should be removed. If you don't think about that and take that into consideration, then what's the validity in the future for somebody else that does something and they don't comply with whatever these conditions are, the message to the community? I mean, to me, it's now black and white. I've been against this from the very beginning. The county gave him a chance to run his campgrounds under certain rules and conditions, and he hasn't really done it. So the fire company, water company, I mean, if there's exclusions here now because of whatever said, that they can tell you the problems that they've had. They're here.
So we're here to hear from whoever wants to address this issue this evening. So if they want to address issues there.
It was just
we'll
real
be more
quick
than
Sunday is that lots of these conditions weren't met. I'm sure you're gonna get a different story about it, but they aren't met. And it's the rule of, I mean, if you're gonna have rules, then uphold the rules. Okay, so could somebody from the water company talk about the problems there? And then the fire company.
Name's Corey Alchins. I'm superintendent for Wright River Water Company. Since September of 2021, Mr. Simons has been in violations with us on our rules and bylaws on water. And to this date, we haven't reached anything on that. So he just hadn't complied with what we've asked him to do.
And there's currently a court case
Yes.
between the two, correct?
Is there any other question?
Your other customers all comply
Yes,
with it? Thank you.
yes, yes, they do.
Any other questions for? Thank you.
All right. The fire protection people talking about this.
I'm Robert Black, I'm Fire Chief of Madison Township Volunteer Fire Company that serves this area. We do have an agreement with Mr. Simon. It was signed on 5/5 by myself, Mike Reckle of the Rikers Ridge Fire Department, who's the fire chief, and Mr. Simon. And we also, yesterday, what we, on the fire department side, with the 2 ponds that are there, that he would supply fire pumps that we would carry on our truck to be able to get in that water out the pond, either 2 ponds. And that was at a cost of $11,279 per pump with the hard suction. 2 years later, it's all in agreement right here, that he would supply a second pump to Rikers Ridge Fire Department to carry on their tanker. Which the other one will be a floating one, this other one is a boat we just pull out of the department, set over at the pond and start drawing water out of it. So we do have an agreement for that because he doesn't have the fire hydrant back there. And we just try to work with all communities to go either one way or the other, but we do have an agreement with them. If you want a copy of it, I have it here. To show that. But 2 years from the date of this sign, he would have to buy Rikers Ridge Fire Department a pump to do what we're doing now, which under ISO ratings that rate the fire departments, we have to be able to be able to flow 250 gallons of water a minute at each structure fire in the county. And the pumps that we did spec out are at 380 gallons. So we're 130 gallons over. what the requirement with this pump. We also required that a 100-foot wide driveway go to the back of the property, or within 100 foot of the log cabin of the main house. So that tankers and pumpers could get back there and be able to turn around. He's also gonna put another 6 foot onto his turnaround to make it a little bit wider for us to be able to turn back there. I think that's gonna be completed in 6 weeks or so. And I believe the pump, they told me 5 weeks. I'm looking 6 to 8 weeks the way fire equipment's going right now. But we're looking, they gave me a timeline of 5 weeks. So I always try to stretch it out a little bit just to have myself covered, so I wouldn't be giving you false information.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the first pump was furnished to you?
We have, yes, we received the money yesterday for that from Mr. Simon. And the order was placed yesterday. So it'll be 6 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks for it to be. So within 6 weeks, and the time the driveway's done, it we would all coincide. We also had an agreement that we come to the property 2 times a year and practice with those pumps. So we're efficient with them. And, so, but we did agree to that. Also, it's also in the agreement.
Now, what about, well, this driveway, what about the guide wire from the Duke pole?
They're supposed to be moving it. They've already moved it. He's
And
making it
that-
24 foot wide for us to get
And
in.
that'll be sufficient for you after the guide wire is moved?
Yeah. Yeah, they're supposed to have been taking them out, but I think they just moved them in.
They moved it, we're gonna redo the thing.
They redid the whole front.
Actually, I have no,
It's actually,
so we redid the whole, redoing the whole entrance to the property. Duke was great, they got out there within a week of when, we contacted them and we moved those, and so, we had issues with the water company, which we'll talk about. So kind of held it up, and we didn't know whether, we were gonna have to run, 8 or 10 water lines that they were gonna speak, so, but we'll talk about that.
Right.
But I did advise him, once the driveway was done, I would come out, measure, make sure everything met within spec for what we requested. And make sure it's within 100 feet of it, because once you get back to where his house is, 100 feet short of that. It's wide enough for us to drive back there, and then there's a big loop to come around. You just need to make a 6 foot bigger, wider in the curve for us to be able to turn around and come back down. So we do have all that, and all that's in the agreement, so.
The agreement dated.
With, one pump, you feel you could adequately, you're supposed to get one from Rikers Range and one for you guys.
Yeah.
Is you feel pretty adequate that one pump, if there was an incident, could handle a fire till the 2 years comes available?
I do believe so. They're 450 square foot homes. From my experience, I have 4 years experience. I've been shooting 33 guys, so I've been doing this for a while. Most of these look like a camper. It's basically a camper with a setting there, but in our world, it's a fixed structure because it's tied down, hard water, hard electric. Anything new today? I don't know how many of you follow. I follow a lot of fire websites, data, stuff like that. A full blown house that's 1,800 square foot is getting totally involved in about 3 to 5 minutes. So these are 450 square foot. So do the math. I mean, it's never a good situation, but these are the facts that are out there. The flat screen TVs, no matter where you're at, how many people's got at least 4 flat screen TVs in their house? And things burn at 2,000 degrees a piece when they catch on fire. So, new technology, it used to be 7 to 10 minutes that a person had a chance to get out of the house. Now we're cutting the time down to 3 or 4 minutes. So no matter how you look at it, I camp. I'm in a camper. I have a smoke detector, and am I gonna live through it? No, but I go camping quite a bit too, so, I mean. In my world of seeing both sides of the fence, it is nicely laid out back there. I do have to say that, but, you just look at all different aspects of it, that it can, and, between a house and judge between a house and a little old cabin is 450 square foot. It's just, when there's a fire, there's no good out. No matter how you look at it, we can wish for everything, but, you know, this is a nice facility. So one way or the other, I mean, that's, but it's the true meaning of the fire hydrant being back here, me and Mr. Simon talked about it. And I said, that is the best situation. We're talking seconds to set up the hotel hydrants. You know, we wrap the hydrant, we drive in, plug it into the truck, and we got instant water. With the pump, it's gonna take 5 minutes or so to get it going. Cause you got to pull it out of the compartment, you got to put the hard section on, you got to put it in the water. It's nothing I haven't already explained to everybody, so, you know. We do have, when we do roll in Rockers Ridge, Madison Township, there's 1,750, another 14, and 1,800 on Rockers Ridge tanker, so we're rolling in with over 3,000 gallons of water.
Isn't a great deal of the county that, I don't know about Madison Township, it would be a little bit closer to the city and so forth, but Rikers Ridge service area, most of the county is such, there's not going to be hydrants available in the majority of those locations, are there?
No, we usually have to travel anywhere from 2 miles to 10 miles
Mhm.
to go get water. But I will say one thing about the county companies, I've witnessed it.
Mhm.
I've witnessed it over the years, and I always bring this one incident that came up. And I don't know how many people remember 2 houses burning in Kent.
Mhm.
And we had 6 tankers rolling that day, hauling water.
Right.
And we maintained 750 gallons of water a minute for 3.5 to 4 hours
Mhm.
and never ran out of water. So the county fire companies are very efficient with what they do.
Yeah.
And so initially on a call, you only go get 2 tankers. And we have all the fire departments have mutual aid agreements, so we can call anybody.
Mhm.
Canaan would be our next closest one, and
Mhm.
so on and so forth, but, right where this place is at, we're within a mile of the hydrant.
Okay.
So, but the best option is always the hydrant, I will say that. That is always the best option, but if there's another way of doing it, then we'll work with people and try to work that out also.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, no problem.
I'd just like to point out that this agreement was reached on May 5th of this year. He's had 3.5 years to come up with a fire protection plan that never happened until this request to take away the campground permit was submitted. And then now, all of a sudden, we're gonna start doing this stuff after 3.5 years of doing it.
Do we have anyone else that wants to speak in support of the violation being removed? If not, I'll turn it over to Mr. Simons.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. Certainly, for the council, appreciate the opportunity to give you a good presentation on this campground development and the events that occurred, and have an explanation as to the time duration for this particular project. And so what I'd like to do is to start off with, and rather than not knowing the particulars of what the violations were, I kind of had to come with everything, right? I mean, if I had a nebulous notice.
Maybe I can save us a little bit of time or save you some effort on this. Cause so many of the things you're talking about probably will need to be addressed at the BZA when you're going through. When the conditional use was initially granted, there were things that were discussed there in the minutes as such that did not get put into writing as far as actually being conditions that they approved it on. For example, one that I know of, they were going to put signage up on some of the property borders so they wouldn't be getting over onto someone else's property if they were walking trails. That did not get put in as a conditional use, but what we had put in was any ownership changes require reapproval of conditional use, 14 days maximum stay, 24 hours before return, and then comply with all federal, state, and local ordinances and laws. And that is where we had left it. There was nothing addressed in the conditional uses at that time on the sides of the road going back or the fire protection service, other than it is a broad category on all federal, state, and local ordinances and laws. You could pull in that fire protection and so forth as part of that.
Really appreciate that. So do you want me to address the boundary issues? If this, you know, I mean, it was raised at the.
If you wish to, but it's not something that we made as a conditional use at the time.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, because I did have stuff on that, I can certainly address it in the, so what I did is, I handed out. The summary sheet, and it's passed around the table, it's taken from the, conditional use permit. And, and the reason for that is, this was what I would call a repurposed facility. In other words, there were, at the time that this zoning and kind of, you know, it shared what the current where improvements were. So someone was going to repurpose, for example, the first item on there about the existing metal building, is currently used to store maintenance and equipment. And again, that particular building has not been, completed as of yet, but again, there's different things that were gonna be done as part of this particular. When I bought, so the reason I pointed out this is, there's some terms, so again, I mentioned that right towards the bottom of the top half where it says proposed uses. I want to spend some time there because we heard from one of the complaints about the changing plans. I just wanted to make sure that it's, you know, that the terms and definitions in the zoning ordinance are going to be the key thing you're going to be listening to tonight. They're the things that are the basis of the dispute, to the extent there are disputes with the abutters and the water company, is that they use terms that are not consistent with what was actually approved. So for example, the actual language, and again, I would bring a copy of it, but it said, and this is the quote, it's up to total 9 cabins and 4, which meant was going to be a mixture of those. And at the time, it was very early on, we didn't know what the mixture was going to be. So I've heard, and you heard before about the changing from such and such a structure, cabins, or what I had there. You're going to see what has been developed on that property is my residence, and there's either cabin or RVs, and we'll go through that. So, I mentioned that because we looked at that I've done something different. And so throughout my presentation, I'll go, through those definitions. I thought it would be useful. I thought to help understand, I put together, we put together this little part of the checkpoint agencies, and I'm gonna go through each of these, how we've complied or in the process of complying with. And in other words, we have the sewer. We had the investment, we had IDEM, Indiana Department of Environmental Management. That sewer system has been built, completed in 2023. The fire department, we'll talk about that. In my early days in 2022, I had met with the fire department. We didn't sign an agreement. And again, we'll get into the genesis of that, but the issue I had with the water department. They were trying to mandate a fire hydrant when the fire chiefs, both, Art Black and Art Peters at the time, were both, they walked through the options. And so, we didn't sign an agreement because I had another agency, i.e. the Rikers Ridge Water Company, and mandating a hydrant. So we were at loggerheads until just recently. The water, we're gonna talk about the water requirement, the electrical. Talk about the water one because we do have ongoing litigation. Electricity, Duke Energy has been great. They upgraded the facilities out there. That's completed in 2024. E911 is another interesting thing that the board. Do you want me to talk about E911 in here? That was one of the conditions that wasn't condition of the permit, but it was one of the agencies that was mentioned at the DCA on this one. I'm gonna have to touch on it to some degree. And then, of course, the cable. I thought it'd be helpful, we're usually kind of tell you the timeline. There was actually a couple other conditional use permits on their property, and just from a high level, so you can kind of understand how this project was ultimately developed by myself. You know, back in 2010, the Craftons owned it, they had an approval for 30 sites, a very massive, development. In 2019, my wife, Dan, her name was Angela, we got approval in November, then COVID hit. And during this time period, we lived in Connecticut. And then we moved here in September 2021. And again, these are some of the scope of the application. As you mentioned, the 14 days maximum stay. We're adhering to all of these conditions. Again, just out of the actual approval, I just want to emphasize just because we've heard a lot about what we're actually building out there. And again, we were approved for 9 cabins and or RVs. It's essential to keep in mind as we go through this. Apologize for the number of papers, but again, we're not gonna go through every page, but I think it's essential. So what I'm handing out here is basically three pages from the zoning ordinance that was in effect when we did the conditional use permit application, and which is, you know, part of it, what we're talking about here today. And the terms I'm gonna talk about a little bit is because you're gonna hear, again, I obviously have dispute with the neighbors that you heard, and also Records Ridge Water. And these terms are essential for your understanding of the nature and the scope of the dispute and why the project got elongated substantially. So in the handout, we're putting up the word law. Law has a very special meaning under the code. It includes the words plot, parcel, and tract. The second definition is dwelling unit. You're gonna hear people that call these cabins dwellings. And I just want to point out the definition to show that code's definition of the dwelling. Page 10 of that handout where it goes, I just want to emphasize, it's just because this term has been used by Records Ridge Water in some of the opposition to this application. So if you look at the last sentence in this term shall include mobile homes, but shall not include travel trailers or recreational vehicles. So what we got out there are recreational vehicles. We're gonna go into that in detail, but it's essential that you keep that in mind because you're gonna hear the disputes that I have that Records Ridge Water and folks have been calling these dwellings. And so that's why I highlighted that here. It shall not include all these.
So let me ask our attorney at this time. I understand there's a dispute going on in Rikers Ridge Water. Do you see the dispute with Rikers Ridge Water having any bearing on the decision we need to make this evening?
Not unless the original conditional use permit required as a condition some type of compliance with Rikers Ridge Water use.
Yes. We didn't require any type of compliance with Rikers Ridge Water. Is that correct, David Ferguson?
Well, we said the condition was all state and local ordinances and laws is what we had in our ordinance.
Which Rikers Ridge Water Company doesn't make ordinances.
Make ordinance as well.
Right.
So I don't believe your dispute with Rikers Ridge has any bearing on our decision.
Well, we'll touch on it just nonetheless, because it has been the basis of this complaint, as you mentioned, the gentlemen that filed this complaint, cited at the April 1 meeting, and essentially was Rikers Ridge. Calling out all of these different items. And then again, I just wanted to point out this definition, which is not in there, but this is a state law that recreational vehicles include. And I'm just gonna highlight the word park model, because these are park models, they look like little cabins, and we're gonna talk about them. And so what's actually built out there are park models, and they conform with the conditional use permit. hand these out just very quickly, and then we can talk about the ownership changes that was referred to. And so what I've handed out here, these are two plats of my property. And the top one is the plat that was in existing at the time of the conditional use permit. There's a one parcel of land, i.e. one lot, consisting of around 45 acres. The second one is the Cole Simon's division survey, and was carved out two parcels there, and that was done in September of 2022. And the one that's kind of blotted out in gray, dark gray, that's where the residence is located. I carved out roughly a little over 5 acres, and the balance is where the campground's located. So what precipitated all of these transfers was in 2022, my wife, over 25 years, had a seizure, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer. And so for the next year and a half, trying to deal with her debilitating diseases, she, with brain cancer, and she passed away in June of 2023. So the family and I, we were having discussions of how best to, do estate planning, if you will. So there was back and forth with the deed, just because it was just a down curve with my wife's condition. It was just a horrible experience, to say the least. And so there was a couple of years period where I didn't get a lot done on this, just dealing with her situation and those transfers. And so, to be candid, I probably forgot about the time dealing with her health. But at the same time, what brought me forward, it wasn't anybody filing a complaint. It was me voluntarily coming in here in March to try to get them. I've since remarried to Jan, my wife here, and so we're trying to get our estate planning together. And so what precipitated this is to go ahead and get the approval of the board. There was no timeline in the conditional use permit. There was no intention to run around and try to powder up, because it was an entity that me and my family owned, the Lost Trails Campground LLC. And so we were talking back and forth. There was nothing. Again, we're here. We came here voluntarily to get the approval, and that's why the special exception that's pending with the BZA now was filed. That was the sole reason. There was no additional approval. In fact, we're probably downsizing it a couple units. This one said at the 9, we ended up with 7. And that's what we're asking for in the special use. So we're actually going to reduce it down a couple. So I wanted to use it as an opportunity to get the approval for the transfer, so that we could kind of move on with our estate planning. So there was no intention to do anything differently other than I had 2.5 years of living hell, to be candid, trying to deal with that situation that was sudden, unexpected. And so it took me a while, to be candid, to get up and kind of finish this project, because I didn't really know how we started on our home 30 days after she was diagnosed with cancer. So it was very tough. I wasn't able to spend a lot of time. I spent a lot of time in hospice care in Terre Haute, Indiana. And so there was never an intention to go around the laws. And like I said, in summary, I'm the one who filed in March because I wanted to get things cleared up. So I know, because I am getting older, and I want to be able to have a plan, be able to have this campground have a succession plan, which is to go to the family LLC. So that's the reason why these transfers were back and forth, because our family was really undecided. So the fire code compliance, I just want to touch on Robert Black. I appreciate all his work, and the fire chiefs from Rikers Ridge. They both are Peters, and Mr. Greco today. They've both been great through the years, starting in 2022 with our Peters. And so the access agreement, he touched on that. We got a plan. The reason we haven't started on the road is because of our ongoing lease with the water company, because we didn't want to be widening the road and have to dig up a hole. It's about 1,200 feet back to the property. So that has been kind of put on hold, but we have a plan. And then the water availability, back in 2022, I've spoken with the fire chiefs. And at that time, these are the 3 options. They said do a 6-inch water line with a hydrant, or the intermediate plan of what they call a dry fire hydrant, which would pump water out of one of my ponds. Or the third one was the pump that both of them agreed on. And again, the reason that agreement was never finalized was because of the ongoing insistence from the Rikers Ridge Water Department solely. It wasn't the Rikers Ridge Fire Department. It was just the water department, and you'll see a couple documents here in a moment, how they were trying to mandate that, and that was the reason why, we never, was able to move forward, but our goal, not to get this property transferred, we're trying to get these things all resolved. So what I'm gonna hand out here, these are from, the company is out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And they're required under federal law to provide the certification for it. And it's the fact that these things are, the recreational vehicles, they're designed specifically for recreational use and occupancy, and they certify that it's done in accordance with the requirements that are not set in the federal law. And again, I attached just one of them, they're actually considered an RV, they each have titles, they're not considered real estate. They are secured, you know, and they are tied down, but these are specifically designed as RVs. And I'll pass around a brochure. These is what they look like. Well, I can see them what they look like. And they look like real cabins, but they're all that RVs. Okay. So I am going to touch any questions on the park models RVs. So do you want to hear on the E911 issue?
I know, I don't
Okay.
believe we need to hear that. I think the BZA may have some issues there, but we don't.
Okay. So, again, as was mentioned, we have ongoing litigation with Rikers Ridge Water, and there was a lot of issues, and they had to deal with calling these RVs dwellings and higher hydrants. So, and again, we had two hearings they ended on May 23rd, and the judge issued her decision on a preliminary injunction. So the litigation is ongoing, and we're under a June 5th termination notice. So what we did, just because of the unable to work a deal, so we went out and worked with the state. We drilled a water well yesterday, so we're not going to need Rikers Ridge water. Went through. What I want to pass out is the material I worked with IDEM, and went to Mike New out at the Public Health Department, started there and worked through IDEM, and we got it permitted. Well, was drilled yesterday, and it'll take a few days to get it completed. So we're not going to need Rikers Ridge water to service the campground. So,
Do you know yet on how many gallons per minute that well?
well, we're working. I don't know.
You're still drilling it?
Yeah, it's not tested yet. And,
Have you get water?
yeah, they have water. You know, we have water, and we're working on getting a storage tank and everything, the pressure system set up so that we have what they recommend a day's worth of water supply on there. And but what I wanted to talk about is the requirement we went through, so that this commission has satisfaction that, you know, we went through the procedure and got the approvals from Biden.
That's probably not necessary. Your
Okay,
approval on item on a water
okay, so-
supply, that's not going to enter into our side of
So
things.
bottom line, to me, the first place to come with them is a public water system. There's exemptions for small campgrounds like all of them. And again, we'll present it at the
Yeah,
BDA
that's
meeting.
fine.
But again, we have a solution, and we're hoping that the Rikers Ridge Water Board would give us a couple extra days, that their termination date is Thursday. I mean, we did everything we possibly could to try to work with them. We would have preferred that solution, didn't happen. So we have a water well, we're happy about that. It's just a matter of, getting the rest of the installation put in. So the boundary fencing, so that's, so I think. So in the end, you know, the different violation that you referred to, I think that we're in compliance with the original conditional use permit. Admittedly, I wish this project was done, but I'm just telling you candidly, the issues that I had to overcome with my wife's illness and, you know, all the ramifications, and, you know, it wasn't something that you just wake up the next day and start marching for, which we didn't. And, it's worked with the fire department, worked with the water department best I could. And I'm happy to tell you I have a solution for all those. And if you anything that anybody on the commission thinks that, hey, Mr. Simons, we'd like you to do this, I just have respectfully ask the commission to give us an opportunity to cure any of those issues, because we put a lot of time, effort, and money, and everything. And we think this is a wonderful project for the community, and we'd invite you to come out if you wanted to see the facility. It's a very, very nice facility. I think, you know, Jefferson County and the city of Madison are very, very happy with the facility that has been.
Anyone on the plan commission have any questions for Mr. Simons? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else want to speak on?
I just go ahead, if I could, please. Back when we originally started talking about all this, myself and our peers, I guess I was the lead person with my qualifications of talking about all this. The fire department would not agree to anything until it's in writing, and that's when we did that. Right? So anything that we talked about some plans, but nothing was ever put in writing until it. So that's a fire department can have one agreement by gentlemen's agreement. It all has to be done on paperwork and signatures. And I explained that to Mr. Simon too, that that's what it had to be done, and that was not this year.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mr. Musil, do you have anything else?
No, I'm very disappointed though to learn that the original meeting did not record everything that happened in minutes. So you excluded lots of things that were said. Of course, they aren't on record, but I was at that meeting and there was a lot more said than it was supposed to be.
You are correct. I've read through the minutes of that meeting as such, and there were things that were mentioned in that meeting and so forth that were not reduced to writing as such, and those will be things when the BZA looks at this that they need to have a little bit more discussion on as far as getting those points in writing. That's a separate board. I don't sit on that board, but
But my point is that you're excluding a lot of information that should have been there.
Yes, I understand that.
I do have just just in response to Fire Chief Black, again, he's been great throughout all of this. I was one part of the record, this letter from Marcus Ridge Water dated April 1st. And so, because this letter really crystallizes the reason why, you know, I was being put in a very coerced situation. On one hand, willing to sign a deal with the fire department, but at the same time, I had this independent water company, and you can read it in writing. But it says that in the second paragraph, it begins with Mr. Simons, and they reference this meeting. This shows you how long the dispute had been going from September 26th to April 1 of this year. You know, they mentioned he changed his plans for the campground. He's asking for 9 RV shops in one rental, which I said my zoning allowed me to do. And then the next sentence is the essential reason why no deal was struck with Rikers Ridge Water Company, doesn't say the fire department, specifically requires for a 6-inch line to be installed with fire hardened at the end. It was a water company, and they never, until the decision from the court yesterday, finally got a clue that they backed off on that. But through April 1st, that was their formal position. So that's why no deal was signed with the fire, because I'd be putting myself in a position where I'd have to furnish two fire hydrants at 12,000 fees. Plus having to put a fire hydrant. This is about $35,000 worth of expenditures to put this system in that they were requiring. And this had nothing to do with my residence, my campground. This solely was for fire protection. And I refused to do it. I told them I wasn't doing it. I knew the fire chiefs what they wanted, but I wasn't in a position to sign a deal because of this position.
Anyone else? If not, then I will close this hearing and we'll open our regular plan commission, and we've got some short business to take care of there, and then we'll go on through our agenda. First, for our plan commission meeting, we'll have roll call
Warren Oxshire,
here.
David Bramer.
Here.
David Ferguson.
Here.
Jenny Beverly. Here. Lisa Hammock.
Here.
Ray Black.
Present.
Mike Pittman.
Here.
Britt Copeland. And Larry Wynn.
All right, we do have a quorum. Then has everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes from our regular meeting on May 6th?
I read those and move that we accept them as presented.
Okay, we have a second.
I'll second.
Have police a second. All those in favor? Minutes are approved. And we'll move on through to the discussion on the petition to revoke the conditional use permit. And I think probably the first thing to start with is, Pat, if you could address on the intent of our change in ownership side of the issues. That was the only thing that jumped out at me initially. And then I saw that basically the ownership had stayed the same person. And you cover that a little bit for us, what your opinion is on that, if we've had a violation because it formally wasn't redone each time.
Well, sure, you guys have to determine whether or not there's a violation,
I
not me,
understand
but I mean, the intent of the change in ownership provision is that Jefferson County considers conditional uses to run with the person as opposed to with the land. If that's not clearly stated, then that can get muddy. So for example, variances always run with, once a variance is granted, always a variance granted. But with conditional use permits, because it is allowing for a restricted use on the property, the county has a vested interest in making sure that any new owner who takes over the property, if they're going to maintain that use going forward, that they are also personally bound then to any of the conditions that are appropriate for the property, and that they understand what the requirements are with regard to the conditional use. So that generally speaking, the intent of making sure that it's the same owner is to make sure that the owner has been before the Board of Zoning Appeals, has had those conditions applied to them, understands that those conditions are applied to them, and has agreed to abide by those conditions as a result of the ongoing use. So that I believe is the county's interest and intent is making sure that the person is aware, making sure that the person agrees, and making sure that the person follows through on specifically the conditions or the restrictions that go along with conditions. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes. So we've had basically, even though there's been some name changes there, the primary owner has remained the same. And a primary person would have been aware of all of those conditions and so forth as we went through this as such. But what's the board's thought on that? Do you see that as a violation at this point?
The name changes, what were the name changes?
So
Was
I can-
was it a person or was it a corporation?
There's been times that it was Lost Trails, and then there was times that it was husband and wife, and then times it was a name that was Mr. Simons by himself. But I've had those in front of me. I don't have them currently, but there's,
What if the,
and some of it came about, if I understand correctly, because of combining the parcel into one large parcel. It'd been a group of parcels originally,
it was a bit opposite. So it was originally 45 acres.
and you brought part of
Yeah,
it
so
out.
once the house started up getting built, the house was still under construction in September 2022. My wife was 3 months in third cancer. And so we were having a debate about looking into an out policy. You know, I was the sole member at that time and everything. I had discussion with the family, but you know, there was no third parties involved because, you know, if you look under the Secretary of State, I was always the sole member of that entity for the duration. And again, the sequencing, again, something I could probably overlook. It was never any intention to evade. So there was no, you know, time limit, and never really said you had to do it before or after. And so what precipitated this, just trying to get all my personal affairs in effect was for Kyle and give approval formally, and they said, no, you can't do it, it's just leave it in my name, and so.
so if Mr. Simon sold the Lost Trails, the name remained the same on the deed, on the
It changed on the deed several times a little bit. There was, but there was,
But if he changed, let's say though it changed the Lost Trails and wanted to sell it, would then he sold it to another party, would we?
It'd be up to you to determine whether or not that constitutes
Yeah.
a change of ownership.
But he would be allowed to change it. He could sell it to another party in the Lost Trails, but not another owner name. See what I'm saying? So instead of Sam Simons be John Smith instead of Lost Trails.
And again, it would be up to the planning commission to determine whether or not that constituted.
then, Mr. Musil, I was unclear. In your complaint, you list 4004, and I know that's the main address. What was the other address supposed to be? You got 43008. And I, maybe, is that, you're just referring to the other parcel there that's probably 41. Okay, that's fine.
I can try to clarify, so
No, that's all right. That's enough on it, as long as there wasn't something we didn't gather there. There's basically two parcels that are involved, which is 4004 and 4012. Originally, I thought maybe just an extra zero would got put in there because there is a 4308 that belongs to Sharon Wilson that's on down the road a ways, so that'd be separate. Yes,
you split that property into 340 Damn. April zoning meeting, and I don't have the paperwork with me right now. But one building is at the front, the original water meter is, I believe it's 4004. Lane goes in, makes left-hand turn, and then he separated that part out. If I remember right, Sam, it was 4008, I believe, and then where his house is 4012. He owns all three of them.
I think there's only two parcels apparently.
If that gets into the 9/11, if you wanna have a.
Yeah, when I looked on the plat map, I think we're just dealing with the two
Yeah,
parcels.
they're both in my name personally. The original special exception, I didn't include the residents, even though the original conditional use. So that's why I've amended it recently to make sure it's all done. The properties are still, they're both in my name and two parcels. The three structures that, on 11 addresses, is just different from a parcel and a lot.
Then there was discussion as well on the fire protection side of it. The problem, we did not make the fire protection a conditional ordinance. We didn't make compliance with Rikers Ridge there as far as part of things. What's the board's other thoughts or so forth on this?
I have a question. I know as part of our UDO, an access the road has to be 24 feet wide.
That's our new UTO, not
with
the
the
one that
old
was in
one.
effect when this one went in.
Okay, how wide was it supposed to be back then? Do you know?
I don't know that we had a specified width at that time for a campground.
Okay.
There was not a specified width in the other.
Old ordinance. And then my other question, and this may not be our board, this may be the zoning board, is this was supposed to be completed in 1 year. And according to the findings of fact, it was supposed to be one particular use and said permit shall automatically expire if or for any reason the use has not commenced within 1 year.
Commenced is what
It's
means that
started.
we require that they have to start construction within a year.
And
We
not
don't
completed.
require that it has to be completed within a year. There's that time frame would run on, but there was a permit that was issued early on. And there was no construction commenced, and you came back at a later date and got a second special exception, correct? Am I remembering correctly on that?
It's a conditional.
Conditional use, they call it. We call them special exceptions now.
In 2019, original one, and then we had COVID,
Yes,
and it expired.
and it expired, and so he came back and got another one after that, so he had complied with those.
Mhm.
And then construction started within the year on that one.
Yes.
I guess one of the other areas that came up, and it's not part of ours, but just to address, at the BZA, meeting when you originally had this in the minutes, there was discussion over putting signage up to mark your property lines, keep people out of the adjoining property owners, and that didn't get put in as a conditional use, and but I know it didn't occur from what I understand. Is that something you're willing to do if BZA wants that on this next go around?
Yeah, I mean, I was prepared to talk about the boundary and the mark, Indiana has laws about marking no track, the equivalent of that, and I mean, again, I'm prepared to put it more, if you want to hear, I mean, I'm prepared to have this, the BZA.
The BZA would be more to listen on that side than
Yes,
us. Yes, it was not part of ours, but I just wanted to kind of clarify that I did understand there were some things there. And the BZA, I think we acknowledge that we could probably do a little more thorough job moving forward on getting some of the things that are talked about on conditional uses. But just because they're discussed in the minutes and so forth, doesn't always mean that the board felt that they were serious enough to put down as conditional use. That's up to the BZA when they make their final findings of fact and so forth. There could be lots of things discussed and even agreed to, but the BZA still may not have felt they were most important enough to record as a requirement.
I was on the BZA then. I'm the only one I think left, unfortunately, but, yeah, we did, but our intent, and we didn't put it into the conditions as well as we should. And we did fall short on that, but our intent was from some of the other board meetings, it's gonna be hearsay since I'm speaking in there, what I remember of the meeting was they really wanted to have those approvals from the local water, the fire, the state with the DNR, cause we had a board member that was an ex-DNR. But unfortunately, the BZA did not get those clear enough. When we put state and local ordinances, we should have been more clear on that. So the BZA did fall short on that on the conditions. We didn't get detailed enough. I do know that what Warren's brought up is on the trespassing. That was a very big issue during that hearing. That the neighbors were really concerned about four-wheelers and stuff coming in on their property, and we had a lot of discussion about the trespassing and getting the signs up, and one of the board members was very, very adamant that got done. But once again, we talk about things in the board meeting and we assume everybody's on the same page, and we didn't get it all detailed in the conditions, which we have learned, and that will not happen again. That being said, that kind of summarizes what went on with the thinking of the BZA and why we didn't get it as detailed as we should have, and we did fall short on that.
David, on your exhibit A1 from the findings of fact, and I don't know, is that included with the permit?
Yes.
Okay, because it actually does talk about that, what you just said on the third page. Applicant will be required to comply with all federal, state, local requirements, including local zoning permitting, the state and local health department, DNR, and the Corps of Engineers were necessary. Approval will be contingent on following the above, including sewer taps, water taps for additional cabinets and existing cabinets. Applicants may need a release from the Indiana Department of Homeland Security, Division of Fire and Building Safety, and the Office of the State Fire Marshal. So it's covered, but it's just not explicit.
Yes, that's
So-
where, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was our intent, was what you read, to put it in it specifically. in
Very
it.
specific,
Yes.
instead of just being a broad.
Broad, yeah.
Mhm.
What's the board's thoughts on this? I assume the only action we need to take, Pat, is if we were going to revoke. We don't need a motion not to revoke.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, it would fail for lack of action, yeah.
Does anyone want to make a motion to revoke the permit?
I'm going to abstain since I'm on the BZA, so And I'm gonna be hearing some of this, so I'm gonna abstain from any.
Want to abstain as well because they're my brother's speak.
Hmm.
So.
Well, I'm gonna ask one more question.
Yes.
I'm sorry. So when they go back before the BZA to renew, will they follow the previous UDO or will the new UDO be in effect? So it could be the new one.
The new UDO will be in effect,
Okay.
yes. Anything else? Then I believe that concludes, the board is not going to revoke the current conditional use that is there. And, we'll move on our agenda to our next item on it. And that is to hear from Sharon, is it Roeder?
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, regarding the location of Vital Farms on 9499 Poplar Ridge Road, Canaan.
I submitted some paperwork to Taylor back in April, and I don't know if everyone got that, but I'm going to give you, this doesn't follow. I'm going to give you that again. That's this thing. And then I'm also going to give you what I'm going to talk about today with some photographs. No, that's included, but there's additional material, okay?
Thank you.
Is that yeah, they're a big packet. Does everybody have one? There you go. All right, everybody has one.
Okay.
May I first ask a question? Is anyone here from Vital Farms? No. Okay. So this is basically a review of what I brought in earlier, and I am going to just basically read what I have. I'm a much better writer than I am speaker, so bear with me. I do not like public. So, good evening, Chairman and members of the zoning board. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to address you on behalf of the residents of Poplar Ridge Road. My name is Sharon Ritter, and I stand before you to articulate a series of well-considered requests pertaining to the proposal of development by Vital Farms. Vital Farms, acknowledged as a B Corp for their commitment for balancing profit with societal and environmental integrity, has put forth a proposal for the construction and operation of a 20,000 chicken concentrated animal feeding operation, known in your BZA as a CAO, on Poplar Ridge in Canaan, Jefferson County. It is our position that approval of such a permit should be deferred until the Unified Development Ordinance, or UDO, and the Board of Zoning, BZA, documentation undergo necessary amendments, and the enforcement of these provisions be duly ensured. There is a critical need for openness and engagement with the community of Poplar Ridge regarding the project's societal and environmental impact, which has unfortunately not yet been forthcoming. The grounds for our recommendation to deny a permit are underpinning by the series of potential detriments to both community and the environment. Our analysis anticipates significant water pollution risks such as manure runoff, the potential for groundwater and waterway contamination due to unmanaged runoff from substantial chicken litter produced by the operation, nutrient overload, the threat of dangerous algae blooms, and subsequent ecological damage posed by phosphorus and nitrogen-rich manure runoff. Given these concerns, we advocate for the implementation of a mandatory development plan with the Jefferson County's UDO to address water pollution specifically in line with every BZA application. Furthermore, odor emissions from decomposition of manure pose another substantial challenge. The odors emitted can negatively impact the quality of life for the surrounding community. Our recommendation, drawing upon the guidelines, which is enclosed in your packet, from Purdue University's insights on confined feeding operations for UDO to mandate the injection of manure rather than spraying to mitigate odor. To ensure community interest and fully safeguarded, we propose the incorporation of Ripley County's area zoning section 80.24 on special exceptions into Jefferson County's UDO special exceptions. This would enable the zoning board to exercise prudent judgment on a case-by-case basis, assured by community consultation and adaptability grounded in location-specific consideration. Our submission encompasses detailed proposals to address the following: infrastructure adjustments to support increased traffic and maintain resident safety. You will see pictures of the road damage already done by the heavy traffic. Noise abatement measures post daylight hours, focusing on vehicle noise, facility equipment, and other machinery. Lighting solutions that align with the residential needs, reducing light pollution and upholding the current quality of life. Sections within your county UDO concerning confined feeding require clarification on policies addressing extended confinement periods. The matter also extends to waste management protocols, both human and bird, potential insect infestations, and the resultant implications on wildlife and avian diseases. Our objective is a thorough reevaluation of local zoning and regulatory structures, ensuring they offer robust protection to residents against the repercussions of industrial farming practices. Effective enforcement of these regulations is paramount to mitigating negative implications on the community's landscape and overall quality of life. In closing, we urge the board to reflect on the gravity of allowing Vital Farms project to proceed without these key changes. The health, safety, and welfare of Poplar Ridge Road community hinge on the decisions we make here today. We appreciate your consideration in this critical matter and anticipate your proactive steps in safeguarding our community in the future. I am going to add that based on sitting through this meeting today and listening to the items that were not put in writing for the gentleman here for his campground and his permit, I feel even more strongly that we on Poplar Ridge need to have these special exceptions implemented into your DDO. I also have more concerns, and Jim here has some vital questions. He's going to continue what I have to say with you on the community questions that everybody has come to us with questions, and we made a list, and he's going to ask you some of those questions. The problem is we're not here to answer the questions. We were hoping that Vital Farms would basically man up and be here to address the community and say what their plans are for our road, because our road is a small, circuitous, I don't know, there's a copy of the road in this packet. I encourage each of you to take a drive out there. It is not a road that is made for heavy traffic and for heavy trucks. And I would prefer that you look into putting a farm that is more conducive in size to our rural community. That is what we are asking.
We had received the planning commission director had received your letter back about a month ago, April.
Yes,
And this is the first, and it asked about having a moratorium put in place.
yes,
And this is the first meeting that we've had since that period of time. So there's had not been any opportunity to put a moratorium in place as
Okay.
such. That would be something that normally the commissioners would have to put the moratorium in place. They rely on conversation and so forth from the plan commission as to whether they felt there was a need for that moratorium as such.
right,
So that did not take place, and
Correct.
government moves at a slower pace.
Yes.
During that period of time, Vital has applied for their building permit.
Yes.
And what we have to judge Vital under is our current ordinances that are on the books.
Correct.
And they met those requirements.
Correct.
Our staff reviewed that and so forth. So they have been given a permit to proceed with building their facility.
Right, I saw it it is posted at the driveway.
Yes, and I believe we called and let you know that when it
Yes,
happened.
you did, and I apologize emphatically to Taylor for biting her ear off.
Well, I
Oh.
understand. And so there may be the board may see that there's a need to discuss this going forward, that
I
we need
agree.
to change these and so forth. What we would change at this time will not have a bearing
I know,
on Vital as
I agree.
such.
I'm aware of that, but I also want you to make Vital accountable. I want you to come and make sure that they follow all of their, well, your very vague UDO guidelines. Because we as a community are going to have to live with the repercussions.
Because when we did our ordinances originally, we relied on what state guidelines were as to where and we have stricter guidelines for what's considered major CAFO or confined feeding operations that require IDEM approvals and so
Right.
forth. Historically, Jefferson County's been a farming community and
Yes,
has wanted to be in support of the farming side of things.
I agree. I saw that, I looked at your comprehensive plan from 2021.
And you can see it starts out with a statement
Yes,
as supporting farming and
Yes.
such.
I also saw what you talked about Crossroads Communities, and when I read that little blurb,
Yeah.
that I saw that we are basically exactly what
Mhm.
you're looking for the Vital Farms. I understand all that. What I'm asking for is to going forward, that you take a look at what Ripley County has on their UDO. I mean, they have very specific itemized items that people have to abide by to get a large CAFO in their area. And I understand that Vital Farms tried to get a farm there and also in Switzerland County. I went to Switzerland County, talked to Mark Archer. He said that there was basically pitchforks and meeting with people that were just absolutely off their rails.
Mm.
It was like terrible. And Vital Farms pulled their permit from them. Also, they have put a pause on their permit in Ripley County. But why are they going forward so quickly here? They didn't even do any mitigation with the soil in any of the other counties but here.
I think that they moved forward with ours because we had established ordinances that were done just 3 years ago or so that laid out very clear definitions as to what could be allowed and what wasn't allowed. There wasn't any question. If I understand, a couple of these other counties did not have ordinances that addressed it much at all, one way or the other. And so we had ordinances that treat larger confined operations much different than would an operation of this size.
So when the operation and if the operation fails, what happens?
As to how do you mean if it fails?
I
If it
mean,
goes out of business?
well, or the person that's maintaining it does a very poor job. And we're stuck with bird carcasses all over the property and odors that are outrageous, and our property values are decreased because of it.
I believe that if there's local ordinance violations and there would be state law violations as such, there would be means to enforce those. The state is not going to allow a facility to have dead carcasses all over. They step in. David, you may be able to address that a little bit.
Let me put this in, this isn't a large operation, compared to what IDM considers a large
I
operation.
know that, they're staying
So,
underneath their required.
IDM does require the carcasses and be handled and disposed of properly through either hauling off or decompose, or, put it in a container and those kind of things. There's a number, it's on their website. But to kind of put this in perspective, I don't know if you would complain if there was 60 cows on this 53
No,
acres.
I would complain, I mean,
But-
if it wasn't managed properly.
But there's Lisa, we all have 60 head of cattle on
Right,
farms
I-
all over.
Yes,
And
and
to
the
put this
gym
in-
right next door.
Put this in perspective. Those 60 head of cattle on 53 acres will produce more manure than those chickens will do.
but they will not be confined
They're not,
in a
from my
barn.
understanding through Vital, they're gonna be out in that 53 acres. Now, weather conveying, just like I put my animals inside when the weather's not proper, then when they're out, you know? But let me finish.
I'm
And
not
as
saying,
far as road traffic, my understanding on what they consume and what they'll eat, you're maybe looking at 1 to possibly 2 semi-loads of feed per week.
all right, then come out and see what they've done to the road already.
Well, the construction is different than just like log trucks per se, going up and down the road.
Do you know what we had to go through back in 2020 to get that road from a gravel
I-
road to a
I live
paved
on
road?
a gravel
And we
road,
compromised with the tar and chip one?
but I'm just saying, there's log trucks, there's farmers with grain bins, our roads are what they are in our Jefferson County. I live on a gravel road. And we
I
have,
lived on a
we
gravel road
have
until
semi.
till
I-
1918.
So I'm still there. So we still have that, but what I'm saying is the magnitude, I know 20,000 birds sounds like a lot.
20,000
But
birds
it's
sounds
not-
like a lot in confinement.
Well, IDM doesn't see it that way, but I'm just saying in proportionally cow farms are producing, you're worried about runoff. Well, you're gonna have that many, 60 head of cow produces 720 tons of manure, where chickens will produce 500 tons of manure. So you got that on our farm, you got it on her farm, there's a lot of farms in Jefferson County, but we weren't concerned about that. And mine are in 53 acres, 55 acres in the winter on our winter pasture, and they're there for 6 months. So, I mean, this has been going on in Jefferson County in agriculture for months and years and years and decades, and since Jefferson County's been in place. And the requirement that they're putting on that land is the same requirements we have for our cattle. And I'm just saying, I know it's a different form of animals coming in, but the manure load and just the activity, like when I'm bringing in hay, I'm bringing at least 1 semi-load a week in to feed those cattle for that time, because they're eating 25 pounds a day roughly. And that's a lot of hay. So I'm just putting in perspective,
Have you driven the road?
I have driven through Canaan quite a bit. yes.
Have you driven Poplar Ridge Road?
No, I have not,
Then please do.
but I would.
No,
But they're
because
not-
there are four circuitous 90-degree turns. One of them at a curve that goes into a ravine,
Right,
which when I moved there, my driveway is at the end of that ravine. I had to have them take and replace the culvert because people were going off the road into that ravine. So they put a larger culvert in to make it more dangerous. And now you're coming down from a hill in the ice, and Jim can attest, and so can Dorothy. People have come down there and almost gone over the road into that ravine. Now because I have the house that's attached to that ravine, get all the foot traffic that says knock, knock, knock. Excuse me, I just jumped my car in your ravine. Can I call a tow truck? Well, no, thank you.
well, I'm just saying they probably did a site evaluations and know what their vehicles can and can't do.
All right, I know they did 2 wires across the road for traffic. I saw that. We all saw that.
That was in Switzerland County.
And it was in Switzerland County, not in Jefferson County. And I came down here and I asked if you guys were doing that. Were you guys doing the automobile count? Someone told me no. I think it was Jacob. Isn't that his name, the zoning guy? Josh? Jacob?
Goes.
Okay, well, he said no, that wasn't him. I talked to Mark Archer. I asked if it was him that put those ropes across. Because they have done it in the past when we asked to have the road paved. And he said, no, it was not him. It's a private
It probably would have been
contractor.
Switzerland County that did some type of study or private contract.
No, he said it wasn't him.
PennDOT did that.
NDOT contracts those out.
Okay,
NDOT.
right.
I spoke to, I'm Mike Pittman, I'm the,
I-
I spoke with the gentleman from, Vital Farms.
Yes.
And he gave me his name and phone number, and he would be happy to discuss with anyone.
Oh,
His name is Eric Evanson, and I've got his phone number if you want it. Have you talked to him?
I've called him and he won't return calls.
He returned my call. So, and he said he would, I asked him to come down and do a public meeting. And he said he would not because of his experience in Switzerland County, which I understand.
was
You know,
it was very
It was, I
violent.
understand it was pretty exciting, but I've got his phone number. I would encourage anybody to keep trying. I mean, I was persistent too. It took me 5 phone calls Cause he's not in, I got his voicemail and we finally touched base. But I spent, I believe it was, in fact, I think Taylor went to lunch and came back and I'm still on the phone with him. So it was about an hour on the phone with him, discussing the whole situations you're talking about. But he's willing to talk and, again, I think it's, as Warren said, our UDO is written so that they are within our UDO.
I understand that, and I feel like your UDO for such a large, even though he doesn't agree with me, CAFO, it needs to be amended, and that's what I'm asking, is, okay, since we already are stuck with it, we know we're stuck with it. So why not let the rest of the community not have to go through what we're going through and live this hell?
And my next avenue is to talk, and Josh will be with me too. Josh and I have been out there and we've driven the road.
I know you have.
And, what I'm proposing is that we make sure that Vital Farms does their share to make sure the roads don't
Maintained?
improved,
Okay,
not maintained, but improved. and
Thank you.
Maintained, so that you don't have any worries and they don't have any, because they don't want their trucks going off the road
right.
any more than you do. I mean,
Well,
if I
right
was-
now, Jim is doing all of our snow removal. Jefferson County doesn't even do snow removal out by us. Jim does it,
Thank you.
right there in the corner.
But no, and again, we're doing all we can do to make sure that they're gonna be good citizens in this county. And you guys are safe and everyone's safe. That's what we're trying to do. But again, they're within the ordinance, at least as we read it.
Right, I understand that. I mean, that's what made all the red flags go up, was when I read your ordinance. Then I went to Ripley County because I knew that they had tried to put one there. I read their ordinance and I was like, well, no wonder they're not getting one here. And then I went to Swiss County and Swiss County said, it doesn't matter what our ordinance says, the people have spoken. So run them out on a rail.
And they're within a half mile of Switzerland County.
Yes,
So, and I think we were within a mile of Ripley County.
Right.
So
that's
they're close to both. So
All
probably
three
why
of
they
them.
picked that site.
exactly.
But anyway. But I wanna let you know what we're doing.
Thank you.
We
I
under-
appreciate that.
We understand your concerns. I understand your concerns on the road side of it. That's something that the commissioners will be concerned with as well. They're not wanting their county roads destroyed, and if there's a problem, there's too much traffic. It's something we can have some further discussions here and see if we want to visit a need to change those ordinances or not. We also have a great deal of the farming community
Right,
that may speak on the opposite side because of worried about the impact it will have on it. And when we did our ordinances, we asked for public input every step of the way. And on these particular sections, we didn't get any pushback on any of it,
right.
you know, as such, so,
Well, because we didn't know about it till after it was,
right.
we saw what was going on in Switzerland County, and they said, oh, do you know they're putting one in your county too? And then we found out where.
And you know, the people putting it in, they have a vested interest in being good neighbors. I hope that comes about, you know, regardless of you touched on it earlier as far as if the practices are correct. Whether it's this 20,000 chickens or it's somebody that's over there with 20 cattle,
That's
if
correct.
they don't handle things correctly, they can be a hell of a nuisance, for
That's
lack of a
right.
better
And it can
term.
be an eyesore. It can deter sale of the other residents.
This operation will have an incentive to run a operation that doesn't have a negative impact on its
I
neighbors.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Did you want to speak, Jim? Jim wanted to have a word, so I will defer to him.
Let me. You wanna go ahead?
Let Dorothy go.
Maybe I'll let you get serious.
Ladies.
I'm Dorothy Green, I'm Dorothy Stevenson Green, okay? I was born on that farm, okay? So all the dirt on my feet is Poplar Ridge dirt, okay? And I was gone for a while and I came back and now I live on my granddad Elston's farm, which is the last house in the county. Okay, and if you wanna say how we're not always treated right, someone called for a welfare check on me, which wasn't necessary. And the EMTs do not come to my place, do not come to Poplar Ridge. Then so they call Switzerland County, But if I call Switchman County, then, but you're in Jefferson County, so I'm in no man's land, but anyway. But other than that, it is a beautiful place. And the Stevensons came there in 1820, so we're 200 years. I'm not quite 200 years, but I'm close. But the only thing is my concern, and like I said, where they're grading off is the sledding hill comes where we went, right in front of my dad's the house I was born in, goes right down to Wilson Fork, which goes to Yellow Britches, goes right around 62. So there is a lot of, and that's the highest elevation in the county on Poplar Ridge, so that part is okay. So, but it would be nice to tell, but then here, maybe a month ago, I happened to look out, and maybe every 20 minutes to half hour, there was a huge dump truck full of gravel. For 2 days this went. Okay, like they said, we fought to get our chip and seal, which was nice. And so all these dump trucks went down through there just in 1 week. So up on top of the hill and the road, like I said, this is not your thing there. But in the winter, and the one right before the woods, before you get to their house, and then down on Dave Poling's corner, some of those corners they can't get around hardly with that. So one of these days, we're gonna have to bring in all the equipment. So it's been nice to be informed, and I do know when we sold my dad's farm in 2001, somebody applied for a permit for a house. And they said there was not enough water for a house on Poplar Ridge. So I'm assuming that the water company, which is not your thing, but I don't really understand, and it's just nice to be informed. It's like, I always kind of want to know if something's going to get me, just what it is, okay? Then it's wherever that goes. But anyway, I love Poplar Ridge, and like I said, I was born there. My father was born there. My grandfather was born there. My great grandfather immigrated from Scotland in 1820. So anyway, I do thank you all for your time, and these people are very gracious. They're newcomers to Poplar Ridge, but anyway, but the road, I was a little distressed about the road because by winter time, and especially the one before you get to the woods, is really, somebody I think was out there. Now, Switchman County has been going down the road. Of course, it will affect their road eventually, but anyway, they may run into a few of us a few times out there on those bends, so see how that goes. Thank you.
Yes, Jim?
Yeah, my name's Jim Decker. I've been out there on Poplar Ridge for about 18 years. I got a couple of questions. First of all, has just one person drove Poplar Ridge to visit, to see
Mike.
what's going on?
Mike is,
And so is Josh.
so it's Josh.
Okay. You know, as far as the planning and zoning, I would think on a planning department that you would want to see what's gonna be going on before you make a decision. Now, the building permit got issued, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, what type of structure are they putting up?
I don't have that in front of me. They brought in a complete set of plans for it that were
Now,
submitted.
is that open to the public to see?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I would really like to see what.
You could make arrangements with the office and you'd be able to look at that.
I know I checked,
Is the adjoining property.
Mhm.
yeah,
He has the-
it adjoins my property.
Right.
Right next door.
Mm-hmm.
I checked to see how much a chicken drinks.
Mhm.
Okay, and then it ends up, it'll be 5,000 gallon a day that the chickens will drink. That's not including them cleaning. You know, they gotta keep them barns clean. You know, this is all gonna be, to my understanding, it's all gonna be automated. It's gonna be one employee. Okay, that runs this. Pretty big task for one person. I got a friend of mine that's related to me that's, he runs 25,000 pheasant. He's got 5 people working that.
I mean, those are all valid points, but they don't tie directly to what our zoning side of it is.
Okay, well, I'm getting that. What I'm getting at is the county, it should be responsible enough to make sure that you're putting in something that's not gonna go bad. Yeah, what's it gonna do? What's this do for a tax base for the county? What's it bring into the county?
There will be whatever the assessed valuation of the new buildings and equipment and so forth that they put in. Equipment depreciates out pretty quick.
All right.
I understand that normally it's probably $1 million, $1.2 million investment for an operation this size.
Well, I'm sure it is. I'm sure they've done already almost 150, maybe $200,000 worth of earthwork.
Mhm.
Okay, so if you're gonna get taxes off the property,
Mhm.
okay? You don't know how much you're gonna get.
No, but that's not an issue for the.
Just let
Plan
me out.
I'm willing,
Because
I'm
you're
willing
letting-
to.
You're
Go
letting a
ahead.
business, this is a business.
Mhm.
This is a corporate farm,
Mhm.
is what this is.
Mhm.
Okay, so you get tax money coming in. Now you're spending big money to repair the roads or widen them or something, so you're in a negative. That doesn't make good sense. It's not good economics. Okay, we gotta talk about emergency vehicles. The health department, okay, is there any studies? Is the health department up to date on the chicken virus? The bird flu?
It wouldn't come through our health department directly on that. It would be tied into the state, I believe,
The
on those.
state
type of-
requires 30,000 birds to get a state permit. Okay. Jefferson County Health Department, that's knows something about the bird flu. Cause it'll affect every farmer. Because that stuff does translate or transfer to cattle, to humans, to dogs, coons, foxes, every animal is susceptible to bird flu. Okay, we need to hear this. We need an answer on that. Another thing is, on the building permit, is this place gonna have a bathroom or a portalet?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I don't want no portalet
I assume they.
along the road right there where the building is.
We get a septic permit with it. We got a septic permit before we issued the building permit, so there's gonna be a septic system there.
Okay. All right, and, as part of fire protection, there's not a fire. It takes Canaan Fire Department pretty good long time to get to our place. That's some issues I got. I just think you guys got the cart. That's
So
all.
we'll take a look at, those issues, consider them and move forward. Anyone else?
How do we, if he has health department issues, how does he get those questions answered?
I'm not a health department.
So is there,
I don't know
does
about
Jefferson
that.
County have a health department?
Yes, Jefferson County has a health
Okay,
department,
so
yes.
if he called them.
You could talk to them as such, yes, but I'm not familiar with those operations.
Will they be implemented into some of your, what Sharon was talking about? To make sure that, if you get a new facility of this nature, that the health department's informed, that they do studies on this.
Well, the state does, like, they've had a bird flu outbreak there and Rose Acres did in,
In
Oh,
Seymour?
there's been a bunch.
in Seymour, and then I think, possibly even in, not a big one, the biggest one was that they had was in South Carolina and then the one at Seymour, and the state gets involved immediately. So when they get, a bird that has symptoms, they send it off to see if it's just sick or if it has the bird flu. So when they do that, it goes to the state, and the state comes down,
for this particular thing and with Rose Acres. And then they put an action plan put together. And the action plan is worked through the state, and it's not, I don't know if the locals are involved, but I know the state is involved. So the state works with the company to put a plan together to dispose of those animals as quickly as possible, so the spread is minimal. And so once that's done, they do a disinfecting, everything stays, particularly what IDM would love to see, or the Board of Health would like to see, is the animals stay there. So what they did in Rose Acres is they dug a hole, put a liner in, so it wouldn't go anywhere, put the birds in the liner that were exposed, and then buried them in, natural decomposing from there. But it was all lined, and they work with the state. It's not that the company goes on.
Condemned ground, that one.
No, it's just, that's part of anything that dies, I guess, but they put the liner in to protect.
So what do they do? Come and get the liner out?
No, it's just, it's in there. I don't know from that standpoint, but the main thing is that they want it contained and it's confined and it's protected with this liner. And they work with the state on that. Now, I believe that facility is up and running again. It took it, I don't know how many months to, from the beginning, when they first did their initial testing, to the complete cleanup to where they could repop it and get it going again. So I do know that biosecurity on Rose Acres persists, as they have sprays that they spray the tires to minimize exposure.
Okay.
So any vehicle comes in on Rose Acres, you either drive through a disinfectant or you get out, spray your tires with a disinfectant to go into their facilities.
Yeah, it's considered like a clean room.
It clean, they're talking about like their semis coming in.
Right.
So
So they don't
exposure,
take it to another facility.
yes, and then they don't want it spread or what have you.
They're truck washes.
Yeah.
What about the bird flu though, is now transferring to cows, so what about David's cows or his
Or
cows?
his-
Well, the only thing,
The health-
you can read on it, it's, the only thing that I've seen is, a few cases in some dairies, but nothing, it's not a popular thing that happens. It has to be some kind of immune deficiency in the cow. It's just gotta be perfect scenario. It's
Right.
not like every bird that has flu is gonna give it to a cow or whoever. The
Yeah.
people work there, they didn't get that, were on the Rose Acres, never had any
Okay.
symptoms of anything, and they're working with the contaminated birds at that time.
But like I said, it's kind of like which come first, the chicken or the egg, but the thing of it, I mean. I'm like her, and you just kind of need to be a little informed, I don't know.
That is the problem, I think. that
Where you
Vital
have to
Farms-
have, the permits for the
I-
thing or the water or whatever.
I think that they should have probably reached out to the adjacent landowners and had a, and I know they didn't, but I think that probably been a proactive neighbor. But also, if you've seen what they went through the other places, you'd be a little shy to go knocking on doors.
Put in some paperwork that said this is what, is it an egg farm? Or are they just raising chickens
It's
for
just-
an egg? You know what I mean? Or what are we doing in this farm?
My understanding, it's an egg. It's for
It's an egg
production of
production?
egg
Egg
production.
production is what I've been
The
told.
egg production, and then it's also my understanding that the manure will not be disposed of on the property.
Okay.
That it will be hauled off once or twice a year, that there's actually
You go back to the road
there's once or twice a year, not
Twice a year.
a lot of
It's-
traffic.
It's not
And
very
that,
much.
that it is stored inside a building until it leaves.
So it's
the
not in a
building.
pit.
It's not in a pit, and it is dried before it's stored, from what I understand. So I think they take some steps.
Since we have had and have got no response from anyone.
I understand. I think they could have do a better job on answering those, but there's nothing in our zoning
I
ordinance
realize that, but
we
because
enforce
of your
that side of
zoning
things.
so vague,
Mhm.
we thought this was our the
I
best
appreciate that.
recourse to just get them out of here.
Right.
If you can't live with them.
And the manure, they will sell the manure to farmers like us
Right.
who
I
really,
agree.
we want it.
They
It's,
want it.
it's really expensive to
Yeah.
buy. We would love to buy it from like Rose Acres. It's expensive and it's expensive to transport. And I know Dave, they have semis, we have semis too. And we, a lot of times fix roads, county roads, because we've caused a problem. We've had to go out and sometimes we have to go in a ditch to avoid a person that won't slow down, pull over. We don't want to hit them. So they don't want to wreck those $150,000, $200,000 semis. That doesn't include the trailer. So they're gonna be very careful. And
They don't care about other people's yards, I'll tell you that.
They have not repaired any of the yard.
Well, that might be the construction company, wouldn't it
That's
be
probably the
different?
construction company.
It has hired.
It's
them.
hard,
Yeah.
so they're the
Well, and-
responsibility of Vital Farms. I
You-
work construction.
They may not know that that's happening and a note just letting them know that, or just to
Well,
But
stop
how,
by.
how can we let them know when they won't
Well,
reply
yeah,
to us?
I talked to in probably February. I used to lease that field, okay, for hay ground. And I asked him at that time, I said, I'd like, to if you guys are gonna just sit on that, I'd like to lease it from you for hay production. Never heard a word.
Crickets.
Tried calling her, never heard a word.
I think
Don't
we,
care.
we've probably heard all that we can deal with this evening on that end of it, and
That's
And
fine.
if we have any contact, we will pass along some encouragement that they could help the situation by reaching
We
out.
always
and
do, because they
talking to
seem to
neighbors.
speak to you.
You know, I have no doubt that you're going to have more disruption during the construction.
I'm
period.
sure of that.
That's gonna be a given.
Right,
And sometimes during construction, they will wait until construction's completed until they address some of the issues where they've left a rut along the road or got into a yard or so forth, so.
That's kind of what they did.
But
I
if they're
mean,
gonna be good neighbors, they need to address those issues.
that's what we feel.
Yes, I understand
We,
that.
we are just asking them
Right.
to be a good neighbor.
Mm.
Like I told my husband, I don't want them to bake me a pie, but I
Yeah.
do want them to tell me what they're going to be doing with their facility.
Well,
That's
we'll pass your concerns along. too.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. We have one other item on our agenda for this evening. We've had some difficulty with, mailings that we send out. We require them to go out 10 days. People are not receiving them as quickly, and we're wanting to make a recommendation that we change that postmark to a 15-day deadline. Any thoughts?
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Yes.
Whatever.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone have anything else for this evening?
Interesting.
Move for adjournment. I'll entertain motion, we adjourn. We have a first, second. All in favor? Aye.
So we look to sit on the next meeting too.
You're gonna talk about the post office already?
Yeah.
Pat, here's your.
You come on Wednesday and measure me.
I just wanted to be on.